Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Zach. This is Watcher of Realms, and today we'll be discussing 5 mistakes I made as an early game player that I want you to avoid. So, the first mistake we're going to discuss today is a summoning related mistake. In Watcher of Realms we have these different summoning banners, whether that's different events running at different times. So we have the guaranteed sometimes, which was this banner here, the Invocation of Oath, that had a 250 pulls guaranteed lust. Also came with a 10x on the arrogance and lust as well. Fantastic banner, one of the best we've seen in the game. And then alongside it at the minute we have this Vienna Silas banner that's running as well. Again, two fantastic champions. I didn't actually really get to pull much for the Silas Vienna banner. Went all the way to 250 on lust, but lust more than well worth it. So the mistake I want to talk about is, at the minute, really any of these banners would be a win. But on some of the more common events, more at a weekend when they have the summer events usually, you'll usually have your special Invocation of Spirits, and then sometimes you might have the normal Invocation of Spirits running alongside that. Nothing worse than pulling all your hard-earned summoning crystals, only to realise you've been pulling on the wrong banner, going for a 2x, and that chance that you thought was there for the extra legendary or whatever the banner is that's running at the time, you've essentially wasted those crystals or missed out on the maximum reward you could have had by pulling on the wrong banner. So always make sure, especially if you're going in and out, the big one I find when I'm going in and out to make room, come in here, sell off my 3-star heroes for diamonds, which is something actually we'll discuss very shortly. I don't think that was on the list, but it's definitely worth mentioning. Selling off the heroes, coming back in, and only to realise that it's reset onto the top. It always resets onto the top banner when you come in. So if I'm pulling on this Invocation of Spirits, go away, come back in, and back on the Invocation of Oath. So yeah, it's very easy to be pulling on the wrong banner there. So yeah, always make sure you just double check before you pull any of those hard-earned summons. So the second mistake I want to talk about today is to do with farming up that gear, especially early on. If we look at the gear raids, when you're first coming into the game in those early stages, if we look down here, stage 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way through here, this is gear that essentially you're gonna grow out of very, very quickly. And it's not worth pouring stamina into this early on. When you're first starting the game, you're actually much better served to head into the Dwarven Association, the shop, and when you're in here there's always pieces of gear available, especially early on. The better place to pick up the gear instead of wasting that stamina early on. Tend to find gold is in an abundance. You're not short of gold early on, especially as you're working your way through those early missions. So yeah, it's definitely worth jumping in the shop, picking up your gear from here, and then waiting until you get on to some of the higher stages. So at the minute I'm just trying to push for 18 on all three. I've got my gear raid 1, I've got my gear raid 2 at 18, just gear raid 3 that is holding me up. Once I make that step onto 18, you'll see here, it's going to be all of this red gear, the mythic gear, which is sort of really what you want. As I said, you will outgrow your gold gear and certainly your purple gear very early on. And obviously the higher you work up, obviously the better drop rates you have on the ancients as well. So definitely worth waiting until you can farm the higher stages before you go pouring in mountains of stamina into those gear raiding sessions. And actually the next mistake I want to talk about, mistake number 3, is also farming related, although not gear this time. So with the resource raids here, your EXP raid and your gold raid, actually a couple of things on these. The first one I would say is, if you're going to be farming gold or you're going to be farming XP, do not start farming without having a bonus. active. So you can see here I've got my EXP bonus active currently for another 17 hours. I was actually farming up some EXP for some of the champions I picked up in some of the summon events over the weekend. And to do that this morning, I made sure I had that EXP bonus on, because as you can see, EXP and hero EXP potions gain in battle plus 100%, so that gives you double the rewards, double bang for your buck on that stamina. And you will find as you progress through the game, stamina is one of the more, if you're not careful, one of the more sparse resources, something you definitely need to make sure you're keeping on top of. And again, gold, not been farming gold. I don't tend to farm gold too much, but the gold bonus is the same again, same as the XP. It gives you 100% gold boost on that farming. And then also, while we're talking resource raids, very similar to the last mistake I was talking about, these early stages of the EXP raid, they're just not really worth your time. You don't want to be pouring mountains of stamina into these stages. So for those of you that don't know, these stages correspond with the campaign. So as you work your way through the campaign, you'll open up your different EXP stages depending on the difficulty you're playing. So as you're playing through the normal campaign, you can see I'm just on stage 9 heading towards this next EXP. Every few stages, usually 4 to 5 in, you hit an EXP stage, and really you want to be waiting until you can hit that EXP raid 7 until you start really farming. Don't get me wrong, there were points where I was working through the storyline earlier on and I just needed some EXP just to boost up some of those heroes to get me through some of the stages. Absolutely, I was farming at some of the earlier stages, but I wouldn't make a habit of it, and definitely don't farm more than you absolutely need to at these stages. Moving on to mistake number 4 now. So this one is all about upgrading heroes, and this is one of the mistakes I definitely regret, one of the ones I certainly made myself very early on. So when we're upgrading our heroes, there's a majority of ways to do that, and one of those is to upgrade their skills. So for example, if we look at my lovely Cratch here that I picked up this weekend on the Lust event, obviously pulling for Lust was good, but obviously I was much happier with pulling that Cratch. I haven't invested anything into him. I'll let you find out why for yourselves. Spend any time in the Watcher of Realms space and you will learn about Cratch. I haven't invested anything into him, so you can see to start with we use this skill dust that gets us through the first few levels, and then as we work up past the first few levels into someone, for example Lust, I've invested a bit more heavily in, you'll see we need to use these skill crystals. Now these skill crystals are one of the rarer resources in the game. You will get them time to time. You get more early on as you're working through things like the storyline, but later on you start relying on them to drop from events. Mainly is where I tend to pick up most of mine, but you really don't get the opportunity to get a lot, and so don't do what I did and get all excited by your first shiny legendary on your account. So Kriya here was my first legendary. Actually not a terrible champion, don't get me wrong, she's not top tier and she did help out early on working through the campaign, but definitely not a champion, if I could go back, not a champion that I would have put too many skill crystals into. So yeah, hold on to those skill crystals, do your research, look around, look at YouTube videos, there's plenty of tier lists online, and just make sure you're using those skill crystals really for those higher tier champions, to make sure you're getting the most out of what is actually a very rare resource in the game. The next mistake I'm going to discuss then is all about feeding heroes. So when we're using either the quick star up function here or manually upgrading heroes, One thing you definitely do not want to be doing is, I don't actually have many set around other than a couple that I use. These rare heroes, you'll see when we dismiss them. I don't have any to show on here, but when we dismiss them, we get 30 crystals, 30 gems from dismissing them, and those can be used to feed back into either your stamina or your summons. So absolutely don't be using them to star up other champions. And then equally with your rares, to a point, we shouldn't be selling off any of the rares or using them for food as we get the awakenings. Sorry, rares, epics. Any of the epics, we should be using these to awaken up through the levels. You will also find that every time you awaken an epic, you get a 4-star piece of food essentially to feed into champions to use for starring up. So you actually get the best of both worlds by awakening them. And then once you've awakened them, say you're at full awakening, as I am with my Idril here, picked up a lot of Idril this weekend as I was pulling. I think was she on the yeah, she was also rated up, so that will explain why. I think I pulled an extra 3 copies of Idril this weekend. You can actually sell those off, those epics, into your currency over here, and that can be used. Nothing like, don't get me wrong, there's nothing crazy in here, but it is quite nice just to have a few of these awakening shop coins lying around. Use them for the EXP bonus or for some auto battles to help through with the farming. But yeah, definitely don't be feeding them into other champions. It couldn't be easier to star up your champions working through here from your 1 to 2 stars all the way up using this tool. So much easier than in some other games, so absolutely take the time to star up from those lower level champions. Get those up rather than feeding in your rares and epics, because they have much better uses elsewhere other than just being fed. So that's it for today, guys. There's your 5 mistakes that I made early on that I want you to avoid. Pretty common theme across all of them. Use your resources wisely, as with most games of this type. Early on, those resources are coming thick and fast, and you feel like you've got plenty. As you start progressing a little bit, so where am I at now? Moving into maybe about 6 weeks, am I? 48 days there. Moving into the sort of 48, 50 day period as we're moving on. We're looking at 6 weeks onto those 8 weeks. I'm just starting to feel like some of those resources are a little bit harder to get hold of, especially gold, and as I said earlier, stamina, not as readily available as they are early on in those first couple of weeks when they're throwing everything at you, making it look like you've got loads, and then yeah, slowly, as with all these games, they will slowly pull that back. But I will say, compared to some other games I've played, Watcher of Realms does a fantastic job of not making them too scarce. I've still not run into a point where I'm not able to do the things I want to do in the game. But yeah, as I said, use those resources wisely, do your research, make sure you know which champions you want to be investing in. Don't just go throwing all your resources into whatever first shiny gold legendary you get, thinking that's going to see you right through to the end game, because in reality, unless you're very lucky and pull a Boreas or a Silas very early on, that's just not going to be the case. So yeah, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, leave me a comment, let me know what mistakes you've made, and I'll see you in the next one.